deal. It's come to that point where we're going to have our testimony for the night, and we're going to have our brother Ryan come up here, and he's going to share what the good things that God has done in his life. I first met Ryan, was it about almost a year ago now, isn't it, or close to it?
A little more.
A little bit more than a year. I remember when he came walking through those doors, and I looked at him and I saw that beard and those dreadlocks, and I said, "Oh, Lord, okay." But the Lord has really developed a good friendship, through the time that we've known each other and the things that we've shared with each other, and there's an everlasting bond that's been formed there, and that's definitely the work of the Holy Spirit. So brother, I'm thankful for you. Thank you. I thank the Lord for getting to know you. So why don't you come on up and share what the Lord has done for you. I'll be man. All right, man. It's all yours.
Oh boy. All right. How's that look? Pretty good? Okay. Cool. All right, just gonna give a brief word of prayer before I get started. Lord, I just come to you now. Pray your blessing on this testimony, Lord, that you would not let me leave out anything that you would have me share. That you would for all believers here, edify them, Lord, through this testimony, and that if any here do not believe in you, that they might see you as the way of salvation, Lord, and that if any struggle here with drug or alcohol addiction, that they might be able to see the way in which I have been helped by you and through these 12 steps, which I believe you have shown us in your word too. So Lord, I just pray again your blessing on this time, and we praise your holy name, Lord. Amen. Oh man, all right, guys. Well, thanks for coming and hearing. I was looking up what the definition of a testimony is, and it's a recounting, one of the definitions, a recounting of a religious conversion or experience, and also evidence or proof provided by the existence or appearance of something. So I'd like to think that the appearance or existence of something in my life is the Holy Spirit, is Christ, and so I want to give a recounting of that experience and that religious conversion. So in order to do that, and this is where I better start my timer, because I could get a little too long-winded with this. I'm going to give a little background to my life. Many of you know I've struggled with drug and alcohol addiction for a long time. So kind of how I got in, how that came about in my life. When the Lord started turning me to him, when I gave my life to him, what that looked like and how I still struggled, and then bring us up to the present day where I've gotten to know a lot of you folks, and I'm celebrating a couple weeks ago 6 months of sobriety from drugs and alcohol. So that's a huge blessing. I have gone 6 months in time before, but I've never experienced what they refer to in AA. There's a reference to a cessation of fighting. There's a phrase that says, "and we have ceased fighting." And that is what I have experienced in these last 6 months of sobriety through working the steps, and God's blessing to me through this experience has been to have it not be a struggle not to use drugs or alcohol. Primarily alcohol in the last number of years was my main struggle. And man, to not have to fight to stay sober every day has been so huge. It's just been incredible. And So anyways, I really never, like I said, I had gone 6 months of time sober from drugs and alcohol before, but I was in a treatment facility, which I guess I can just get to my actual background and story and get started on that. But anyway, so I just want to praise God for that, because that, and I believe that that's been a product of his blessing in my life, but through me actually working these 12 steps, which I really feel like are just invaluable for anyone who's experiencing drug or alcohol addiction. So, okay, my life, where I was born. I was born in Macomb Township, not far from here, 21-mile road in Romeo Plank, between 21 and Hall Road, 38 years ago. And I really had a great childhood, a great young childhood, especially when I think back. My mom and dad loved me. You know, my mom especially was super involved, really always trying to just give me a great day, you know, find fun stuff for her. I was my parents' firstborn, and then I have a younger brother, 5 years younger than me. And she was always looking for things for us to do, you know. Sarah and I are gonna take the kids to like a dinosaur exhibit thing at Canterbury something, whatever it's called, I don't know, in Lake Orion tomorrow. And yes, Canterbury Village. And that's like, my mom did that stuff all the time, you know. And my dad, he really worked hard to take care of us, and it was such that my mom didn't have to work. We weren't wealthy by any means, especially when I was younger, but my mom stayed home with us. You know, my dad was the sole provider, and I'm sure at the time, in fact, I know at the time, it was kind of like, well, whatever, Dad's just not around that much. Now I know what that was for and what it looks like to provide for a family and to take care, and so I really appreciate those sacrifices that he made now as an adult. So, young childhood, very good. We were Jehovah's Witnesses, so that meant religion was a huge part of our life. And when I say a huge part of our life, I mean we had your typical Sunday, what was the phrase? The meetings. We called them the meetings, you know. So you'd go to your Sunday meeting, and then you'd go to your Tuesday night meeting. So Sunday was 2+ hours. Tuesday night was about 2 hours. Then you'd go to the book study, where you read a book together from the Watchtower organization's publications, which is like the another name for the Jehovah's Witness governing body authority group, you know, is the Watchtower, right? If you've ever had them come to your house and knock on the door, they'll have the Watchtower and Awake. Well, at least they did back then. I don't know how much has changed. I haven't been for a while. So so we'd have the book study on Thursday night, and that was an hour. And then on Saturday morning, we would go out and knock on doors to, start Bible studies was the idea, or just share your literature, try to talk to people about the Jehovah's Witness message. So you figure that is Sunday for 2 hours plus, Tuesday for 2 hours, Thursday for an hour, Saturday morning for a couple hours. I mean, it was all the time. We were regularly, and my family was into it. We weren't, like fair weather Jehovah's Witnesses. We were there all the time at all of them, you know. So that was it. That was life until I was, for my whole childhood, really. And about the time I was maybe like 11 years old or so, it's really my first negative memory, if I think about it. But it was a kind of a big deal. There was a situation with a family member who I was very close with, that my parents sat me down and my brother and said, so-and-so is and chooses to live in a way that Jehovah doesn't approve of, and we won't be seeing them anymore. And this was a person that I was very close to. We were very close to. Like I said, it was a family member. And that put a little fear in me. That was the start of like, oh my gosh, you know. And I just kind of thought, I think at that age, like, boy, they must have really done something really bad, you know. And to mention that is not to fault my parents, because in retrospect, I understand the challenge of raising kids with biblical morality. You know, you do want to kind of protect your children from something you see as wrong. But I just share that to say it planted a little bit of a seed of fear in me. And that could happen, you know, that someone that is very close could be instantly extricated from your life, you know. And so fast forward to, let's see, where do we want to go after that? There were some other things that happened when I was around that age, 11, 12. You know, you're just starting puberty. We moved to a new school district, so I went from having all kinds of friends to no friends. You know, it was very, and my parents moved into a new home. I remember them being very busy, very much, a lot of upheaval, nothing crazy, but just, you know, mom and dad yelling at each other, getting upset, they're stressed, they're frustrated. And so I was kind of going through some stuff at that time too, and also the internet had just come out. So you can imagine where that story could go. You know, young man hitting puberty. Now all of a sudden the internet is here. No one knows what the internet is until now. You know, I mean, it's like 1999 or 2000 or something. So that turned into quite a struggle with sexual sin from a young age that I also saw in family members that caused me to start to feel like, well, boy, they're saying this, but they're doing this. And so I'm not going to talk to them about any of this stuff that I'm struggling with, you know? So it really kind of, in working through a 4-step in the 12 steps, I kind of realized where these fears kind of originated, you know? And I realized that at that age, I was starting to withdraw trust from the people who I counted on, essentially, for various reasons. So I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit. Around 17 or so, 18 years old, maybe I should backpedal. Around 15 or 16, I decide, man, you know what, though? I really want to do the right thing. I want to go full bore into this Jehovah's Witness thing and sign up to knock on doors as much as I possibly can. You know, they have different qualification levels of what you can sign up for. So I started doing that. They called it being a regular pioneer, you know, so essentially it just meant you went out 20 hours a week to knock on doors. So I did that, and in doing so, I really dove into a lot of their teachings because I wanted to be able to share it with people. And also with the advent of the internet, I was able to research them. And I came to realize that I thought a lot of it was suspect. I didn't believe a lot of what I was reading, right? So that kind of mushroomed into just, I don't know if I believe in God. I don't know if I believe everything that I felt like I had been told about life, because Jehovah's Witnesses are a very insular community. You know, I didn't have friends that were not Jehovah's Witnesses at all. By the time I was 16, I asked to be homeschooled because I didn't want to be around people who were not Jehovah's Witnesses. You know, I felt, why are you sending me to public schools to be around all these kids? I can't be friends with them because they're part of the world, they're worldly, and that's wrong for me to be around them. So why am I even going? You know, so I start being homeschooled. So 17, 18 years old, I'm homeschooled. I'm realizing I don't think I believe in any of this, and I'm out there knocking on doors full time, and I really felt like my whole framework of reality just kind of fell apart. And at that time, I was dating a Jehovah's Witness girl because I'm, like I said, 17, 18, 19, starting to try to have a relationship. I was very horrible to her. You know, in retrospect, I just see these character defects that we learn about in the 12-step process just forming, because when you don't trust anyone, right? When you withdraw your trust from people, then you're starting to try to, it just doesn't work. So, that, without getting into relationships too much yet, that was, I did not treat her well. And at some point in time, she came to my parents and said, Ryan doesn't believe in any of this, by the way. He's got books on Buddhism, and he's, this. And then sure enough, Mom and Dad go downstairs, because I was still living at home at the time, and here's a bunch of books on Buddhism and atheism and this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, then, it was a problem. So because that is pretty much about the worst thing you can do as a Jehovah's Witness youth, because there's nowhere for you to go in the minds of your family, because where are you going to go? Because we are the only true faith, It's not really a situation where, like with Christianity, we recognize we have denominations, there are different denominations, and we feel passionately about ours, but we unite over certain beliefs, and there's none of that. There's no ecumenism with Jehovah's Witnesses. We're the only ones. So it was tough. It was very much so, I was either in or out, and I removed myself, I completely removed myself, and it caused a lot of upheaval in my family. And I did not go about it a good way. I behaved in really, I did not care about my parents' feelings. I treated them really poorly. And the next development in the story would cause me to treat them even more poorly, which was, a caveat to all this. My entire youth, I had terrible back pain, really, really bad back pain. I don't know what it was from. It just, from the time of being 12, 13, 14, I was always doing this. I was always moving weird, because of some kind of pain. And, it would go to chiropractors, and it wasn't really that helpful. And so all of this is going on in my life at I think I was about 19. And I had started doing CAD drafting for construction for my family's construction company. And so I got an office there to do the CAD drafting in their business. And this is how naive I was to drugs, because I had never used them growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. I think I drank alcohol like 3 times and got violently ill, and just, that was it. I had no, you know what I mean? I was like, I'm not doing that again. I open a drawer in this office and find a bottle of Vicodin. And I just thought, man, I've heard that's really good for back pain. I've always got this back pain, right? So I no idea what a narcotic was, it was just, so I take it, I drive to my AutoCAD class at Lawrence Tech, and when they talk about being like an addict from day one, that was the first drug I ever took. I remember still being on 696, driving west, and feeling like the heavens are opening up as this one pill of Vicodin is kicking in. Because I never experienced such a wave of calm and peace in my life. It was like, not only did the physical pain go away, but I just felt uplifted. And it's interesting, I'm thinking as I'm talking about that, in AA they talk about, and of course we do in CR, really the 12 steps in general, talk about a power greater than ourselves, right? Well, that was my power greater than myself. In that moment, instantly, that Vicodin was my power greater than myself. I didn't have God. I had pretty much thrown him out, although I wasn't really sure, but I sure didn't know anything about him, I figured. And so it's like that Vicodin, as soon as that hit, I instantly looked up a doctor and figured, where can I get more of this? And so I started to research it, because I was always a big researcher, still am. Started to research it, and I realized, wait a second, this is a drug. People are getting high on this. I'm feeling high. I need to get more high. I need to find more drugs. And so I set out to find as many recreational drugs as I could. And for a kid who was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, that's actually kind of hard. I did not have that many connections, but wasn't too hard, as you guys know. They're out there if you want to find them. So, I think pretty quickly I was smoking weed. I figured out that doctors were really the best place to get drugs, practically. Got a script for Adderall and Xanax and Klonopin and anything I could get a script for that would get you high. I could look, oh, well, I guess what symptoms do I need? Okay, I have these symptoms, that whole thing. And so that I'm just off to the races, like I said, about 19, 20. By 21, or maybe a little before then, I've moved out of my parents' home. I'm living in downtown Detroit with another girl who was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, also taking drugs. And it's like very rapidly from the time I take the first Vicodin when I'm about 19 or so, or 20, to then in the next year or half later. I mean, it's like I'm taking drugs every day pretty quickly, And she and I were taking drugs together every day. If it wasn't one thing, it was the other. And so as typically drug relationships transpire, it didn't work out, So at some point, I'm alone in my apartment and sad and depressed. And, I'm thinking, man, what drugs haven't I tried? What is there for me to take? Oh, heroin. I've never taken heroin. This is still, see the naivety of it. Like, I didn't have the frame of reference of well, see, that person's a junkie. They're addicted. I'm not saying every kid gets that, but I feel like I kind of was especially naive. So I look up on the internet, where do you find heroin in Detroit? Oh, the Cass Corridor. Oh, I live a couple blocks from there. Walk down the, stairway, go downstairs. In 5 to 10 minutes, I had heroin in my hand. So I tried it. Wow, okay, cool. And it didn't hit. I was already obviously a drug addict in my lifestyle, but I wasn't instantly addicted to heroin. But boy, after I lost that apartment and after I, had just steadily had my life degrade because of the selfish choices that I had made continually, all of course in my head, it's because my parents are Jehovah's Witnesses. It's because this, it's because that, it's because of this. It's just all blame, But really, in retrospect, I guess it was just every choice was about me and how I felt. Every choice was coming, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but a lot of my choices were based on, poor me. I'm a victim here. I was disadvantaged because I was raised in this way and not that way. And it's like, in retrospect, man, no one's parents are perfect, but I had a pretty good life, I had a pretty good childhood, but I couldn't pick up the pieces of having my reality kind of, or I should say framework of perceiving the world kind of shattered. So I'm getting pretty long-winded on this. I'm about 18 minutes in. Steve told me about 20 to 25 minutes, so I'm going to try to get us there by about 25 minutes. But anyways, I didn't really instantly get hooked on the heroin the first time I tried it. But like I said, after I lost that apartment, after things continued in my personal life to go poorer and poorer and poorer, and my friends, I had a couple good friends at that time still in my life that I had made. But by and large, everyone that I hung out with, we were just hanging out smoking weed. We were in people's garages smoking weed, driving around smoking weed. There wasn't real connections going on there. It wasn't like I was forming a new community of friends in which to live my life. I was just kind of getting high. And so in retrospect, it's amazing to me. My parents let me move back into their house. So I'm living in my parents' basement, and I ask some kid some kid's talking about something opiate related that we're hanging out with, and he says something about morphine, and I'm like, man, that sounds pretty good. Could you get me some morphine? And he said, yeah, I can get that. And he comes back and, in a few days or whatever it is, and he said, well, it's not morphine, but it's basically morphine. It's heroin. I said, oh yeah, I've had that before. That was fine. Sure, I'll take it. And at that point, it was instant. From that time, I think I was about 22 maybe at that point. From that time, I was in a couple weeks taking heroin every single day. Started off snorting it, began injecting it, and no one had any idea what was going on. No one in my life, which was really just my parents and my brother pretty much, and people I'd see at work. And I eventually, I think maybe 6 months to a year into this daily heroin using, just kind of like came clean to my parents and told them, you know, I know you guys think I'm depressed. I am depressed, but I'm also addicted to heroin and I can't stop, you know. And that was like the first time that I realized that I really had a problem with drugs, any drug in particular, you know. I still, at that time, I don't think I even thought that drugs were the problem. I just thought, boy, heroin is a problem, you know. And so if that gives you a frame of reference, I'm 23 years old about at that point, and now I'm 38, you know. So it's been a long journey from that time until now. And so I'm going to try to go a little quicker. I start to crash cars. I get a DUI. I convinced my parents and my grandfather, who, like I said, amazingly are in my corner still in all this, that if I could just get away from where they sell heroin, then I would have a better shot. So they helped me move to Florida. I live in Florida for a year and a half, where in that part of Florida there really wasn't heroin. But you know what else there is? Plenty of other opiates, you know, and plenty of other drugs. So the geographic solution doesn't work. Let's get to the real solution. The real solution is Jesus Christ. That's the solution that does work. And so while this is going on, that I'm realizing and struggling to stay sober, I'm starting to revisit faith and God and these subjects, you know, in my mind because of my immense suffering at being a drug addict, an opiate addict. And so I had been looking into all the Eastern religions. I had been looking into the New Age. I had been doing all that stuff, right? But because I believe he was calling me around a certain time when I was about 25 or so in Florida, I had a lot of time to myself, and I just kind of started to look back at the Bible for no reason in particular other than just I've been reading in all these other religions. Why wouldn't I just look at the religion of the Bible? Maybe I'll look at just a general Bible, not a Jehovah's Witness translation. Maybe I'll just look at it with fresh eyes. And when I started to do that, something just really inside of me, you know, where I realize, like I've heard the description said of the moral beauty of Christ, right? I don't know, I think it might have been John Piper. Someone that I've heard, a preacher, talked about how we come to apprehend the moral beauty of Christ. And I started to see that, and just the idea of needing him. And also, I think I started to be afraid of dying. I think I really started to fear death. And I would continue to grow in that fear until I would start to get legal consequences by the time I'm about 28. And from the time of 25 to 28, the Lord had really been working on me. Still, I'm heavily addicted on and off through that time period. But I finally end up in jail after 6 or 7 years of breaking the law almost every day. And when I ended up in jail, I really just thanked God, because I knew finally I'm going to get some time to be with him and to read his word, and that's really what happened. And that was at the Macomb County Jail. And it's funny because Steve and I have talked. I mean, he would have been ministering there at that time. I don't remember meeting Steve Mazik, but I did meet a man who just recently passed named Steve Malik, who was running the ministry there. And that was the first time I ever made a public profession of faith. I mean, it was in the jail, but it was still public, you know. And I knew, I knew that was it. I had to, that was going to be my life. I was going to be a Christian. That was it. You know, he had put his mark on my life, and like I said, I really had started to come to fear death, and I knew that I didn't want to experience death without him there with me. That was really one of the biggest things. I remember being heroin addicted a couple weeks before I would go end up in jail, and walking to get some dope and passing on 7 Mile in Detroit a dead and rotted out dog. It was a dog carcass. And I remember thinking as I'm walking by looking at that thing, like, that is what you will be if you overdose here. That's what's going to happen. You will be that. And I think a lot of the drug experiences also, it just really, they put a fear into me of the evil spirit world. And you know if one is true, then the other is true. So if the evil is real, then the good is real. If the good is real, then the evil is real. So anyways, I go from jail to Grace Centers of Hope, which was a real blessing to me. I had a cousin that was in the program there, and I'm about 28 at this time. And it's funny because before I ended up there, I remembered hearing he was going into that program. My mom said, yeah, your cousin went to a year-long rehab. I thought, oh man, that sounds rough. A year in rehab. And once I was in jail, I was begging to go to a year-long Christian rehab. I thought, this is what I need. This is going to be great. And it really was, but I couldn't really see how great it was. I can only see it in retrospect, because I walked through those doors fresh out of jail and thought, oh no. It was like, well, I thought I was going to walk into a valley full of roses and this beautiful world where it was just, everything was easy now. And I'm not a drug addict anymore. And it didn't go that way. It did not go that way. And I continued to relapse over the next number of years, mostly secretly, but after a few secretly relapses, I started to talk to people about it because I started to get desperate. And in that time at Grace, I met my beautiful, amazing wife, Sarah, and we had some kids. We got married first, and then we had some kids. We got married, then we had kids. No, but I continued to relapse, and I didn't understand it. I just did not understand it. At no point in time, really, had I considered that I might try a 12-step approach until a couple years ago. And a lot of that had to do with Sarah's father, who is in a 12-step Celebrate Recovery group out in Colorado, who also struggled with drug and alcohol addiction, and had spent a couple years clean, I think, at this point, before I came to the net. And that was really what got me thinking, man, I gotta try that, because what I am doing is still not working. I had the faith in Christ. It was faith. There's never been a question since he saved me that he saved me. But I didn't understand that there is a process that you go through as a Christian, as a new Christian. There's a certain process you should go through. And I think in many ways, working through the 12 steps has helped me to go through that process. Studying doctrine was never a problem for me. I had the religious piece down, but what I didn't have down was taking inventory of my past and my fears and my resentments and the harms that I had done others, and the willingness to be transparent about that with another human being, which is steps 4 and 5. No, if I had been at all familiar with that before I really got desperate after trying it, what I thought was going to work, and it's still not working, still having this struggle to stay sober and failing at it so many times, I probably would have never done that. You know what I mean? Because who wants to do that? But I had gotten to a point where I had been so hoping my wife would go to rehab, and she goes to rehab and is getting clean, and I'm still not able to stop drinking every week, or every couple weeks, or in a problematic way. And it wasn't like there was some question at this point as to whether, like, well, maybe alcohol might be okay. It's in the Bible. That ship had sailed. I had tried that many times, and alcohol almost completely destroyed our family multiple times. So I really got willing when I saw that my wife was getting better, and I had desperately prayed for her to go to rehab so much, and yet I'm still 7 or 8 shots every week, And I'd call and I'd talk to my brother and I'd confess, and that would be a weight off, but it would come back and I would be powerless to fight this urge. And so what I really believe has happened for me through working these 12 steps, which I am on number 9 now, and beginning the amends process, and that's a real blessing. But I really believe that Christ has set me free through this process. I know he paid for my sins on the cross. I know I have not had question of that since I came to know him, since he saved me. But he's shown me how to walk in victory and to have that struggle alleviated, like that phrase that I started with, and we have ceased fighting. So thank you guys for listening to me. I'm 32 minutes in. It's a little longer than supposed to, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you, Jesus. All right, thanks, guys.